What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Coliseum Chronicles Live, joined with Casey Casliner and Terrence Holton, back for another week of USC football banter. Terrence, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Casey. Finals week at USC. We're wrapping all sorts of that stuff, but off season, a lot of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, lots of stuff indeed. We saw USC get a couple of big name recruits this week, as well as just general stuff going on in the USC world. Obviously, the team still putting together the team for next year, and we've talked a lot about the positions, but we'll talk some quarterback stuff today with JAYDEN, MAIAVA, of course, looking to be the main option for USC. I mean, he's pretty much all but confirmed the starting quarterback.
Yeah, I think we can pretty confidently say he'll be the starter.
Of course. But yeah, let's get into, I guess we'll talk about some of the recruits first, if you don't mind. Of course, we know that USC, we talked about it a lot last week, but the recruiting has been, off the charts for USC. Just incredible, scouting from Chad Bowden and Lincoln Riley and Rob Ryan and everyone else involved to get these guys to be bought into USC. And we saw this week, USC gets modern day linebacker. You can also play edge rusher. Sean Scott, and then linebacker, I believe from San Bernardino, Taylor Johnson. I watched some of his tape, so I can talk on him in a moment. But I know that Sean Scott is an incredibly versatile player. He's a guy who could really be, you talk about two-way players, you usually think about like offensive defense, but he's a guy who could like be a two-way player in terms of linebacker and D-line. He's a guy you could put on either. What are your thoughts on some of these just recruits coming in and how the recruiting has been able to keep up this traction?
Yeah, we talked about it a lot last week, but just being able to lock down the California recruiting trail, the last time we saw it happen, that's when USC was, I'm not going to say in its prime, because obviously the 70s dominated then, but the early 2000s, last time we really saw USC lock down the California recruiting trail. They're doing that this year. I want to say it's 16 recruits from California this year. Do you know if that 16, 17? It
sounds like a good number.
High to mid teams number, whatever that is. USC is locking down the California recruiting trail. Sean Scott is a phenomenal addition. He has offers from Ohio State, Tennessee, Penn State, a bunch of really good programs. He's versatile on that defensive line. I think if I had to guess, he'll probably play on the edge when he comes to USC, just because that's most of where, at least the scouting, where the tape has him playing. Also definitely a little linebacker. But he's versatile. He play on the line. He can play linebacker. He's quick off the pass rush, decent run defender as well. It's a phenomenal addition.
Yeah, I think USC has 17 California recruits. I could be wrong. Maybe
17 with Johnson adding today.
Yeah. Watching some of Johnson's tape, he's a freight train. Like, he's a guy who he plays very vertically. Like, you can, rely on him to maybe cheat up in the secondary a little bit and have his eye on whoever's retrieving the ball on the opposing team. He also does a great job of just getting sideline to sideline. Like, he plays a vertical game, but he can be very horizontal as well. And I think he's going to be a huge addition. And again, Rob Ryan. Rob Ryan recruited both of these guys.
He's killing it, dude. Unsurprisingly, of course.
Yeah. He's a guy who has NFL experience. He's a guy that's been in the game for a long time. And I think him as a hire, we're going to look at, years down the line and be like, dang, Rob Ryan was a good coaching hire. It's the same way that we look at Coach Henderson, a year later in retrospect and think, wow, Coach Henderson has really done wonders in fixing this D-line. And I think that goes back to Lincoln Riley and the front office, just, being able to acknowledge what went wrong in prior years. But yeah, I think Johnson, of course, he's not as maybe high profile of a recruit as Scott. Of course, the modern day pipeline getting reestablished is huge too.
About time, yeah.
But yeah, Scott had he had a interest from Arizona, San Diego State, UNLV, Oregon State. So maybe a little bit more under the radar, but 3-star recruit. Again, he's really quick.
Sorry, he said Scott.
Oh, sorry, Taylor Johnson. Taylor Johnson is just incredibly athletic freak. He's a guy that just feels like he's a freight train. He can get anywhere he needs to be. I really like that pickup.
Yeah. Walter Clark says Scott being recruited as a linebacker. I believe it. Like we said, he's versatile. He can play on both the defensive line and linebacker. Would not be surprised if he plays linebacker in college. He's I'm not going to say small just because 16, 17-year-old, a lot of time to put on weight. but would not surprised at all if he's being recruited as a linebacker who can come play on the edge as well. I mean, think about Abdul Carter, who's technically listed as like a linebacker, at least throughout most of college he was. Of course, he's an edge rusher.
Yeah. And then other news this week, Cohen Brown decommitting from USC, 3-star wide receiver. I mean, again, that's their first decommit in a long time. They only have 2 total in the 2026 class. Probably nothing notable, right?
Look, I think I said this last week, maybe a couple weeks ago. I'm never going to worry about wide receivers at USC, really. There's plenty. We talked about like Luke Weaver and all sorts of those guys a couple weeks ago. I'm really not worried about guys, wide receivers, I'll say specifically decommitting. So that doesn't really concern me. It sucks to lose a recruit. Maybe he's the next, I don't know, whoever, but not the biggest loss.
Yeah. And then again, I mean, looking at USC's recruits as a whole, Sean Scott, if you look at every player kind of ranked by their 24/7 ranking, he's in kind of the middle. So again, it just shows how deep this class is. Ahead of him is Jonas Williams, quarterback, of course, big pickup, and right behind him is Luke Weaver, the wide receiver. So he's right in the middle of those two. And then Taylor Johnson, kind of lower. He's the third lowest ranked recruit for USC, but again, it just shows how deep that this class could be in 2026. He's right behind Chase Dennis, the offensive tackle, and right ahead of Malik Brooks, D lineman. And so, yeah, I mean, just a lot of deep players adding to this class. And I mean, I think if you're USC, you kind of just sit and wait at this point and just, hope you have a good season and bring in these guys next year coming around and hoping you don't get any or that many decommits.
Yeah, I mean, just adding on to that, there's 28 total commits right now in this class. 14 of them, including Scott, are ranked within the top 200 of players in the country. That's massive, especially when you compare the past couple recruiting classes Lincoln Riley have. They've been fine. That one in 2023, I believe, was 7th, if I'm not mistaken. Obviously, Deuce Robinson, Zach Robinson, all those guys, Malachi and Nelson. But this is by far the best one that at least we have seen at USC.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the one thing that this class has that the other ones might not is depth, because I think the sort of like playing chess, not checkers thing I'm thinking about is the fact that if you look at that 23 class, USC already had Caleb Williams. Like, you knew that like the baton was going to be passed to Malachi Nelson at some point. Then that doesn't work out. Well, newsflash for you, USC has a guy named Hassan Longstreet who will probably take the keys, the first year that these young kids will be, enrolling at USC.
We're kind of assuming next year, right?
Yeah. So I think that's a huge thing to think about because, I mean, Caleb Williams, leaving, it just left a big hole in USC's offense because he was able to do a lot. And he sort of, of course, had those high-profile recruits. But when those guys were able to take the leap, I mean, he was already gone at that point. Whereas Longstreet very well could have, 2 years playing with some of these guys and be able to develop, even more talent around him.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've talked a lot. We already talked about like the receivers and what they're going to do, the Mekhi Lemons, the Jacoby Lanes, all sorts of that stuff. I mean, when Longstreet gets the keys, when Jonas Williams, I'll even throw out there, guys like Sean Alston, Trent Mosley, these really highly ranked recruits on that offense, on those offensive skill positions, those guys are going to be the people he's throwing to, who he's handing the ball off to. That is, you got to secure those guys so that your future, the quarterback, the most important player on the team, has weapons to go forward.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, I mean, just look at, I mean, we've talked about this class a lot, but I mean, every position.
We should talk about this class. This is the best thing about USC football.
Oh, no, not complaining. I mean, look at the cornerback room. I mean, RJ Sermons, Brandon Lockhart, who, he shut down his recruiting, I believe. Albert Hill. I mean, that's just in the secondary. I mean, we talked about the offense already a little bit, and then the offensive line as well, bringing in some real, Madden Riordan as well on the cornerback position. So, I mean, I think that's the big thing. Like, you see a lot of these classes for other teams, and they have big names that move them up the rankings, but they don't have the depth at every position like USC does. And so I think that's huge. I mean, I think it's certainly valid to be very excited about the future, just knowing that the rate USC is getting recruits right now, like they have a head full of steam. And I think Rob Ryan only bringing in 2 so far just shows that like what's to come. I mean, the 2 he brought in are very solid. So we're only going to see more come. And again, we're waiting on some official commitment, verbal commits from other guys kind of trickling in. But at the end of the day, I mean, you just kind of sit and wait if you're the outsider and you think, wow, this is a group that is sustainable.
Mhm.
There are, a lot of different positions in here. There are guys that can make each other better. And importantly, they're all local. Not all of them, I guess, but like most of the great ones.
You just said 17 recruits. 17 of the 28 are from California. I mean,
most of them. Yeah. Well, yeah. Do you have anything else to add about the recruits? I know, we're also going to talk about.
We kind of talked about it last week. I said we move on. JAYDEN MAIAVA, another bright spot that we just kind of mentioned.
Yeah. I mean, JAYDEN MAIAVA needs no introduction because, obviously he stepped in for Miller Moss last season, basically ran Miller Moss out of town. If we're being honest,
that's exactly what he did. Yeah.
He ran Miller Moss to Louisville. And of course, MAIAVA takes over against Nebraska, gets a pretty close win against them, beats UCLA in Pasadena, and then struggles against Texas A&M in the bowl game, but still finds a way to win. So yeah, there was that. And
wins a win.
Yeah, wins a win. And again, I mean, it was an interesting year for MAIAVA because I think like when he came over from UNLV, a lot of people, and rightfully thought that, he was just automatically going to, be behind Miller Moss to start. And then we get these news that like, Miller Moss and MAIAVA are pretty close in terms of skill, in camp. Right. And I don't think it's pretty obvious when I say this, but MAIAVA is the physically much better QB than Miller Moss.
100%.
Way better. I mean, just in every way. And of course, the one loss that MAIAVA suffered was against Notre Dame. And I mean,
they were very close to winning that game too. Obviously, 2 pick sixes, but they very much could have won that game.
Yeah, I think USC in a lot of ways kind of exposed Notre Dame, like in that game. I mean, Jeremiah Love.
That's one way to put it. That's one way. I like your positive outlook on that game. Yeah.
I mean, look, like Jeremiah Love gets hurt in that game, maybe stuff changes, but it kind of showed the one-dimensionality a little bit of Notre Dame in that game.
They could really only run the ball.
Yeah, and I mean, their defense carried them in that game and still gave up 35 points. So
yeah, and I mean, I was still through for 360 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, and Quentin Joyner, phenomenal game. Mekhi Lemon had an incredible game. He had 133 yards.
Jacoby Lane, those 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, I think that made a lot of, even though USC lost, I think that game, and you could maybe even say the same about the game after that, the Texas A&M game. Yeah. Just it made USC fans excited for what's to come. Even though it's a loss against Notre Dame, it's a game where you kind of poke the measuring stick and you're like, wow, okay, maybe Mekhi Lemon is a legit receiver. And I think we knew that when he broke out earlier in the year, but I think seeing that against an elite defense in Notre Dame, which obviously is suffering a lot of losses coming into this year, still going to be a solid defense, but they're losing some key guys like Xavier Watts and plenty of guys. So yeah, then we look at the Texas A&M game, and MAIAVA throws 3 interceptions, but he also throws for nearly 300 yards, 4 touchdowns. USC wins the game in electric fashion, outscoring A&M 21-7 in the fourth. So I want to ask you, Terrence, what was your sort of evaluation of MAIAVA after last season? It's a limited sample size, just a few games. And how does that sort of, I guess, prime you for next season, just knowing like what he's capable of?
Yeah, I mean, look, JAYDEN MAIAVA is a budget Caleb Williams. That's not to say that he's a bad player or anything like that. I think he's great. His potential is sky high because of, you mentioned, the physical traits that he has. The problem what he has is the decision-making sometimes. Caleb Williams, I think back to one play in particular against UCLA. It was one of those, he took a sack for like 10, 15 yards, way too much. And it was one of those plays where Caleb Williams would have found a way out of that. He would have thrown the ball, whatever. And it's more just MAIAVA's thinking he could get out of this that really kind of doomed him in that scenario. But that being said, like I've mentioned, the physical tools are really there. The connection with the receivers, I think, is going to grow even further. I mean, it's obviously not a lot of time to really adjust going from your first start is Nebraska. You have 4 games really where you're playing with actually the first team guys. I think that when we see a full off season of him under Lincoln Riley, full off season with Jacoby Lane, Mekhi Lemon. I think we see him really evolve and become top. I'm going to say top 10 quarterback in the country. Is that ridiculous to say?
I don't think so. Like I mean, yeah.
Let us know your thoughts in the comments if that's ridiculous. Say Jayden MAIAVA possibly top 10 quarterback in the country, because I think just purely based off potential, I think 100% he could.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the issue with that statement is just we haven't seen enough yet.
Yeah.
I think as like a future take, like for sure though, like I mean, there's a lot of question marks in the country right now. Dante Moore out of Oregon, we don't know what he's going to be like. He could be very good. He could be very not good. Like Nico MAIAVA at UCLA, same story. Like there's a lot of guys who have question marks because although they have talent around them, like Dante Moore does at Oregon, you don't know how they're going to be able to adapt to the new system. And Oregon has done a good job, to their credit, of bringing in transfer quarterbacks and developing them. We've seen that with Nix. We've seen that with Gabriel. But Dante Moore really didn't look that good at UCLA. He had a 1-to-1 touchdown interception ratio, I believe. Maybe he had more. I think he maybe had more interceptions.
I think it was narrowly more touchdowns because I was looking at it the other day.
Yeah. The point is, he was throwing a lot of picks. And I know it's UCLA, like horrible offense in 2023. But again, you just don't know. Like there's a lot of things we don't know, especially in the Big Ten. Like Drew Aller, of course, last year and throughout his whole career at Penn State has really proven himself to be a good quarterback. And of course, coming back to college one more year is going to help him improve. But of course, looking at the Big Ten, like is Dylan Raiola going to have a sophomore slump? Like there's a lot of guys. And so I think that's definitely a good point to say. And Bryce Underwood too. Like, just you don't know how good he's going to be. Julian Sayin, you don't know how good he's going to be. The one thing we do know is MAIAVA is a good quarterback. Do we know if he's elite? Not necessarily yet.
Yeah.
But
totally could be.
Totally could be. Yeah.
Lincoln Riley, it's time and time again proves to be one of the best quarterback coaches in the country. So if a full off season with him, you have plenty of time to learn, adapt. And if he's not up to standard, guess what? There's another guy behind him, Houston Longstreet.
Yeah. I mean, my question to you, I know Lincoln Riley came out, a little bit ago and said, MAIAVA's our guy. Like he's our number one. Yeah. Does that like sort of not concern you, but does that sort of like make you think like, why aren't they even considering Hassan? Like,
no, that doesn't concern me. It's more just you're not going to consider the true freshman who's been on campus for 5 months now, compared to the guy who's been in the system for over a year now, who's played in actual Big Ten games, who's played and almost beaten two good teams. Obviously beat Texas A&M, but almost beat the national champion runner-up in Notre Dame. I think kind of there's no way, especially at the start, that MAIAVA isn't the starter. Because Miller Moss, we both talked about it already. He was kind of the reason he had the job, not that he isn't a talented quarterback. The reason that he had the job is because the fans wanted him to, because he was fantastic in the Holiday Bowl. If you watch that game, you would know it's the worst 6-touchdown game of all time. It was good. It's 6 touchdowns. He was very solid though. He wasn't elite. Miller Moss had the job because everyone learned the story of this guy who grew up a huge USC fan and is now the starting quarterback. And that's awesome. But he proved he's not mobile, which we knew he wasn't. He's not mobile, didn't make great decisions. And when USC needed him most, he disappeared. So he got benched.
Are you sure though? Because Lincoln Riley, doesn't care about the fan. Like, you know what I mean? Like Lincoln Riley doesn't care what the fans think.
Right. Yeah, no, I still think that it's just MAIAVA. I think he's pretty clearly the starter.
No, I do too. I'm just saying, comparing it to last year, like
I don't think we should be surprised that there's not really like a major competition. I mean, compared to last year, MAIAVA had a year under his belt is the thing in college and was really good at UNLV.
Yeah.
So I think comparing him to a college freshman.
Yeah, no, I agree too, but I think it's not completely unheard of to have a guy like Longstreet beat out MAIAVA. And I tend to agree. Like I think MAIAVA should be the number one. I just think like creating a little bit more competition in spring camp might not be the worst thing. And I think
Sorry. I was just gonna say, especially because like we have been hearing that Longstreet has been good in spring practice. So
Yeah, if you haven't watched his tape, like go do it. He's a dual threat. He's extremely accurate. Like it's almost like crazy how good he has looked in some of his tape. And again, at USC, like time will tell. We didn't have a spring game, so we didn't really get the full grasp on it. But yeah, I mean, looking at the Big Ten as a whole, you talked about where MAIAVA could potentially go in terms of the country ranks.
Mhm.
Where do you see him specifically in the Big Ten?
So I'm glad you brought that up because I came with some lists that I found on the internet. These are both from CBS Sports / 24/7, whatever you want to call it, from Brad Crawford. I saw these on Instagram. I want you to guess where they have MAIAVA. This is their 2025 post-spring rankings. I want you to guess where they have MAIAVA ranked. For
All
Big
right,
Ten, Big Ten, then I'll go national because they have both of those.
And if you're watching right now, like put your guess in the comments.
Your guess in the comments, yeah. Unless you've seen it, no cheating.
I'm gonna say MAIAVA clocks in at 8.
8. That is close because he was 9.
Okay.
See, I disagree with that. I think that this. Can I read off the list to you?
Yeah.
Okay, so number 1, Drew Aller. Number 2, Luke Altmaier. Number 3, Julian Sayin. Number 4, Dante Moore. Number 5, Fernando Mendoza. Number 6, Dylan Raiola. 7, Nico Imalieva. 8, Bryce Underwood. 9, Jade MAIAVA. I kind of pretty decently disagree with that. Ooh, George Gear says 12.
Wow.
See, that's lower than that. I would have put MAIAVA. I'm not thinking of it. Is it 6, 7, maybe something like that?
I'd say 6 because I think he's better than Fernando Mendoza. I think he's better than. I honestly think Julian Sayin being in like the top 3 is pretty crazy.
Yeah, I've seen a lot say that, and I'll get to that in the national one too. I think Julian Saban's getting a little overrated. I think he's going to be. I think it's very possible he's great, and I mean he's at Ohio State. He's going to have these awesome receivers to throw to. But for a guy who has not thrown a single ball on a college field, having him as a top 3 quarterback in the Big Ten feels a little disrespectful to other people.
I also think Dante Moore, like, again, I know he was like one of the highest ranked recruits out of that 23 class, but that 23 class was pretty bad.
Questionable. It's been very questionable quarterback wise so far.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm from the Bay Area, so I've watched Fernando Mendoza a lot. And I'll tell you this much. He's a very accurate quarterback. I think he had one of the best touchdown to interception ratios in the country. I think it was 5-1 last year. But at the same time, Fernando Mendoza was playing against Pac-12 and ACC opponents his whole career. Him going into the Big Ten, playing a tough schedule in the cold, I just don't know how he's going to train. Also, Cal had a lot of good offensive pieces. JAYDEN, Jack Endries was a top tight end. Like they had a lot of good pieces. Isaiah Hunter, like they had a lot of good players that I just don't know. I mean, Indiana's a good team. Don't get me wrong, and they're well coached. I just think Fernando Mendoza might be a little overrated.
I do think 5 is a little high, especially for a guy who was in a meager SEC or ACC, last year. Also, I think Imalieva is overrated, especially for the people around him at UCLA. They don't have any real weapons. It's definitely not like that at Tennessee. He was good last year at Tennessee. He just wasn't anything great. I mean, most of his touchdowns came against Akron and Kent State. Did they play Akron? Yeah, Kent State and Akron. Jade MAIAVA, in comparison, was really not that much worse than him. He threw, I think, more interceptions in less games, but the touchdown ratio, it was very much on pace. I think if you compare the 12 games to 12 games, if MAIAVA had played 12 games, whatever the average is, I think MAIAVA was probably at least the same, if not better than Imalieva. And now he's just in a worse place at UCLA.
Yeah, I mean, also, like, you have to remember that this guy, MAIAVA, like, context matters a lot. He comes in against Nebraska, struggles a little bit early on. I know he threw the early pick. And, I mean, I feel like that game, like, they won, but, like, it's almost sort of a wash to me. And I think, like, going up against UCLA, like, I know they only had 1 touchdown that whole game. But UCLA's defense, and I know this hurts to say it, was pretty good.
Yeah.
Like, it was decent.
But also, just like thinking back to that game, I was infuriated watching that game because I don't know if you remember this. They were on like the between like the 5 and the 1 like 3 times and elected to take field goals.
Yeah.
That is like, you don't do that is the thing.
It was
Like,
coaching. Like they
yeah,
they also had like Quentin Joyner and Woody Marks in the backfield and just wouldn't run
he
them.
just was not running it. For a game that they only won by 6 points, 19-13, I think USC could have won that game by at least 20.
Also, like, let's be honest, UCLA had some really lucky plays. Like they had J. Michael Sturdivant just get open on like every single seam pass. And like, again, I mean, that's just poor secondary. It wasn't really an offensive issue. What do you think about MAIAVA, though? We talked about it a little bit, but in the A&M game.
Yeah, the A&M game, because I always remember there's that one play in particular where it's almost like a fumble. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where he runs backwards, like trips basically, and tries to throw it, and it like nearly goes backwards. That's kind of what I unfortunately think about a lot. At the same time, I mean, he was pretty solid. It shows off I think it showed off both his highs and his lows, because it showed that he still has a ways to go decision making wise and just overall handling the ball. At the same time, it showed what he can do with the ball in his hands, his escapability, when he can actually rip the ball, when he can get it to those receivers. So yeah, what did you think?
Yeah, I think in the same way that like people got excited when Miller Moss had like the great Louisville game in the Holiday Bowl. I think like you could be really excited in this one about how MAIAVA was able to connect with Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane. Like Jacoby Lane, we've talked about this on this show multiple times. Kind of like the one sort of, I guess, critique you could have of Jacoby Lane is he just doesn't stretch the field as much as some of the other receivers. But in that game, I mean, he had 127 yards on the, in the air and 3 touchdowns, right? So clearly he was doing a lot more than just, catching the ball in the red zone. And so I think that got me sort of excited about what MAIAVA could do with Jacoby Lane. You also look at Makai Lemon. He had 99 yards. And again, I mean, the only other receiver that actually caught a pass in that game was Kyle Ford, and he's not even with USC anymore. So that really shows that USC could very well go to this, more focused approach of throwing to, Makai Lemon and Lane a lot more than, a guy like Strawn or Corey Sims or Xavier Jordan, which I think a lot of USC fans want to see, because they know that while there is a lot of receiving talent on this team, you only have, realistically at this point in time, there are 2 guys that are going to make the NFL and the rest are question marks, right? So, and that's how it was last year. Like, I know Zachariah Branch was coming off a very good freshman campaign, and, Kyron Hudson was due for a breakout year, and, you bring back Kyle Ford. But this year, you specifically have 2 potentially NFL caliber receivers, very likely. And so I think that game made me excited about how MAIAVA could connect with them. And I know he did throw 3 interceptions, but look, he won the football game. If Miller Moss had played that game, he probably would have also thrown 3 interceptions and lost. That's just the way it was.
So look, literally, when they got down to that, whatever it was, the 5, 6, whatever it was, and Lincoln Riley, they weren't calling timeouts. I just kept saying to myself, oh my God, this is happening again. They're getting down to the red zone. They're not going to call a timeout. They're going to waste the clock. They're going to call some bad plays, and we're going to lose this game. I just knew it was going to happen, and then didn't. And Jane MAIAVA, they made a great play. Kyle Ford, slant across the middle, wins the game. Pretty perfect end to his career as a Trojan. It was, look, the potential, I think, just kind of going back to the receivers that you were talking about, Lemon, Lane, their connection with MAIAVA. This is the first time we're seeing since when I was a freshman, 2022, with Caleb Williams, Jordan Addison. This is the first time we're seeing since then, I think, alphas at the receiver position. And that's not to discredit the Taj Washingtons, the Brendan Rices. I think, and you can disagree with me or whatever, I mean, I think Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane are miles better than those 2. They're both great players. I think both Lemon and Lane will have much longer careers on Sundays than Rice and Washington will.
Well, they're also like younger too. Like they've done a lot more in a shorter period of time than I think. I mean, again, Taj Washington, Brendan Rice, like both of them transferred in, right? Like they both had their share of things. But at the end of the day, Caleb Williams going from Jordan Addison to those 2 was a huge downgrade. And I agree with you. It's not to disrespect those 2 guys at all, but at the same time, they didn't have that alpha receiver who could be a game changer. Like, don't get me wrong, Brendan Rice made some catches that year in the red zone.
He had 12 touchdowns. He was very solid, but it was, sorry to cut you off, but it was literally just like I talked about this a couple weeks ago with the receiver room. There wasn't that guy where in 2022, when I knew USC needed a first down, you know who they're going to. You know Jordan Addison is going to be open. Washington and Rice weren't that.
Yeah, and I think Mekhi Lemon will be that, and I think you need a third and long player, you need a touchdown, like Jacoby will be that guy, and then you have a few other receivers at your disposal. But going back to MAIAVA, I think so. I remember hearing, I think it was a few weeks ago, that Lincoln Riley had said in spring camp, his decision making is really improved. His footwork, I think his footwork was something that we also kind of had been a big question mark about, because it was, you talk about him being sort of a budget Caleb Williams, which I like that comparison. And I think Caleb's footwork was one of his biggest assets that we just didn't see much with MAIAVA. So I think we heard a bit about him in spring camp, just improving across the board. And I think going back to a conversation we had a little earlier, I mean, Lincoln Riley is always going to be positive to the media about his quarterbacks, because that's just the way the offense is. And again, he's going to rally around his team. But he feels very optimistic, more than regular, about MAIAVA. And I think, him saying that he's our number one undisputed, while I did bring up the point of should there be a competition, I think the positive out of it is he has the utmost confidence in JAYDEN MAIAVA that other people don't see. And I think you have to start thinking, to our question about it, is MAIAVA one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the Big Ten?
I'd say so. And I mean, I'd argue the country too. I just think, just based off upside alone, we keep talking about it. He is fantastic. He's got to be up there just with the traits that he has. I mean, he's just, I don't know. Overall, compared to other quarterbacks, compared to Adante Moore, I think he's, you can agree with me or not, I think he's easily better potential-wise.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's a tough conversation, because it's not just the Big Ten. There's a lot of quarterbacks across the country who are kind of unproven that are getting a lot of flowers. Even Arch Manning. Arch Manning is a great quarterback, but he threw multiple interceptions against ULM, and it's not to say that really matters, but the point I'm trying to make is every quarterback, whether it's MAIAVA or Arch Manning, they're going to have their hiccups, especially early on in a system. So yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting thing to look at.
I want to bring up another list for you. I saw from 24/7 that is the top 50 quarterbacks post spring, and I want comments can also guess this as well. Where do you think JAYDEN MAIAVA ranks within this list?
Get your guesses in, everyone. I'm gonna guess. I'm gonna go dead center, just because he is underrated. I'm gonna go 26.
26. Not a bad guess. 38.
Wow.
That is wow. When I'm looking at this list, there's so many inconsistencies with this list, because there's just guys within the Big Ten compared to the Big Ten rankings that are just different. Like Demon Williams, excuse me. He's below MAIAVA on the Big Ten list, but he's 29 on this list. Do you want to know who's at 27?
Who?
Miller Moss.
Wow.
Louisville. And I think Moss could be great at Louisville. Don't get me wrong. I'm wishing him the best. I don't think he's better than JAYDEN MAIAVA. That was kind of proven last year.
I think Miller Moss is as good as the team around him. I just don't think he really makes a difference himself. That being said, he's in a weaker conference. He has some tools. Yeah. We'll see.
Look what they did with Tyler Shuck last year. I mean, anything. Miller Moss, are we going to see Miller Moss 40th overall pick?
Maybe. I mean, maybe not in this upcoming draft. That's interesting though about Damon Williams, because I know I've seen lists that have said he could be the most underrated quarterback in the Big Ten. I've seen lists that said that. What are your thoughts on that? I know it's sort of steering off course a little bit, but
he totally could. I mean, Washington, Jed Fish, look what he did with Arizona in those couple of years. He's fantastic. I mean, I think he's a great coach. And if he succeeds at Washington, I'm looking a couple of years down the line. Hypothetically, Lincoln Riley stops working out and they want to go somewhere else. I would elect Jed Fish as a fantastic replacement. And I think Washington could be really good this year. I'm not saying I'm glad USC doesn't play whoever, but I think Washington's going to be good.
Yeah, Jonah Coleman also had a really good year out of the
Right.
backfield.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting list because I feel like 38 feels very kind of disrespectful because I mean think about it.
Low. It feels low, especially compared. Obviously, I think maybe part of it is like the lower sample size, but I mean Dante Moore's 21. You know what you were talking about Fernando Mendoza? He's at 14.
Wow.
He's above saying there's no consistencies within this list. Dylan Raiola is 18, Nikolai MAIAVA is 19. There's zero consistency within the lists.
I mean, with all due respect to Mendoza, he won I think 2 games in the ACC, like against Stanford and Wake Forest are my guesses, and it's like he's a good quarterback on from a statistical perspective, but as we saw, like Miller Moss was too. You got to win football games, and MAIAVA has proven one thing to me, and that's he's a winner. And I know he didn't win against Notre Dame, and it's a broken record. I've said it already, but he put them in a position where they could have had one of the bigger upsets of the season. And so, I don't know, like would have, should have, could have, but at the same time, like, yeah, he throws those 2 pick sixes. That was his one sort of lapse in judgment, was that decision making, and that's something that you can fix, right? Like he's had an
experience thing. That's just a over time, like learning and getting better thing.
Yeah, and think about the confidence he's going to have. I mean, look, I don't think him going in against Nebraska, whatever week it was, week 8, week 9, is going to hinder his confidence because he's probably happy to get on the field. But I think knowing that he is going to be suiting up in Cardinal and gold on week 1 and being able to lead a team that has a ton of studs around him, not to say they didn't last year, but they had to deal with a lot of injuries last year late in the season, especially, on the offensive side, especially on the O-line. Going into it freshly on week 1, having a couple of games that, USC should win by 4 or 5 touchdowns at a minimum against Georgia Southern, Missouri State, even Purdue, like, I feel like MAIAVA's confidence has got to be through the roof right now.
Yeah, no, 100%. Those are the perfect games to really show everyone what you're about. Obviously, it means a little bit less because you're against worse opponents. But once you get moving, you start getting a flow of everything, then you start to actually get cooking once you hit the Illinois, the Michigans, all those good teams in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and I want to go to this real quick because for the record, like we think that Taj Washington was dependable. It was just like, when you're comparing a guy who's on practice squad to, Drake London,
Jordan Addison. Look, I'm not saying that Taj Washington's a bad receiver. He was good. It's just it's undeniably, it was a step down from the Biletnikoff winner in Jordan Addison to Taj Washington. That's not saying that Washington was bad. He was a very solid receiver. It's just, it wasn't the same as Jordan Addison. And then his reporting cast wasn't as good as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you have to think about it too. Like Caleb Williams was having to throw to those guys a lot more than, say, Miller Moss was having to throw to like Jacoby Lane, because the depth in 2023 receiving wise was just not there. Like it simply was just not there. That's why they went out and brought in Jay Fair. That's why they brought in Kyle Ford. The depth this year is going to be good.
Ford.
What?
Brought back Kyle.
Yeah. Well, you're right. I think the thing that makes 2025 unique is the receiving depth is immense, but also it doesn't necessarily need to be relied upon, especially considering how good the run game could be. And that's a whole other thing that we already talked about. But again, I think just knowing that MAIAVA is a dual threat, it unlocks so many things. Like it very much, if you can turn out to have a decent group of running backs. We don't know which one is going to have the best season yet, just because, Waymon Jordan, we don't know if he's going to be the running back one yet.
Type at least.
Yeah. I mean, Eli Sanders.
Yeah.
But I mean, look at 2023. You had Caleb Williams with Marshawn Lloyd and Austin Jones. And like, again, you can say all you want about how bad USC's season turned out that year, but the running game was very strong. And I know the O-line was not great that year, but it was serviceable, and USC's offense could be so fluid, right? Like they could score, obviously the defense was the issue, but they compared to 2024, they could score by any means necessary. There was no like excuse for USC not scoring because they had a dual threat quarterback in Caleb Williams, two very solid, NFL caliber running backs, and then thin receiver depth, but like still serviceable receivers in Brendan Rice and Taj Washington. 2025 is going to be a similar story. And then you add in the fact that USC's defense is good. It just shows you the how, like, it's just incredible to think like how USC was able to avoid a rebuild.
Yeah, I wouldn't say avoid necessarily. We went 7-5 and 6-6 the last 2 years. But
no, I'm just saying, to clarify, I'm just saying after losing Caleb Williams, you would expect this program to be, in the water, especially not having Malachi Nelson pan out, right? Like the successor, the like proposed successor of Caleb Williams, and then to improve arguably the next season. I that's what I mean by avoiding a rebuild.
Yeah. No, I would agree that they got better last year than they were 2 years ago. I just think, just back to MAIAVA, having a dual threat quarterback compared to Miller Moss. Obviously, Miller Moss, what did he play? 7-8 games? How many was it? 7?
7, I think.
7, is that right? Yeah, I think that's right. It's an unmobile quarterback. It unlocks the offense when you have a dual threat guy like MAIAVA, because what I think too is really something that is not a cornerstone, I'd say, one of the most not important plays of the season, but in his first start against Nebraska, not to win the game. I'm trying to remember, this is bad analysis because I'm trying to remember where exactly in the point this game was. It's fourth quarter. It's an option play on 4th and short where MAIAVA flips it out to Woody Marks. You can't run that with Miller Moss. Obviously, against Wisconsin, I think he had a nice little run into the end zone. You're not running an option play.
He was in concussion protocol in that.
Yeah. You're not running an option play, though, with Miller Moss with the game on the line. You are with JAYDEN MAIAVA because he's bigger, he's stronger, he's faster, and he can do more. You can flip it out to a Woody Marks. This year, you can flip it out to a Wayman Jordan. You can flip it out to a Brian Jackson. That is what unlocks it. Once you unlock the run game more, now they're afraid of the quarterback's legs. Guys like Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane, they're going to get open downfield more.
Yeah, it's all about extending the play. Like anyone who watches football knows that, if you can leave the pocket, create space, and also work with the offensive line to give you time, that you can do things like that. And let's be honest, Miller Moss was good in the pocket occasionally, but a lot of times he would hold on to the ball far too long and without moving. It was like he wouldn't move laterally, and he would just hold on to the ball and get sacked.
He couldn't move laterally.
What's that?
He couldn't move laterally.
Yeah. No, he was incapable of it. And you can look at the offensive line struggling, but at the same time, JAYDEN MAIAVA did a lot more with a banged up offensive line that was really just struggling and kind of like lost its footing at the end of the year, and did more with it. He won a road game, and I know it's against UCLA, but it's still a road game. Like you won in Vegas too. So yeah.
So did
yeah, but I think that's definitely an interesting thing to note. Well, I just want to ask you again. So last year, coming into the season, there was a lot of hype around Miller Moss, and we all saw what happened with that.
Mm-hmm.
This year, there feels to be a lot of hype around JAYDEN MAIAVA. I know they're different, and I mean at USC specifically. I don't mean.
I was about to say, based off those lists I just read you off, I don't think there's enough.
I mean at USC, like around the program, maybe not necessarily just in the program, but like it feels like people. And we can speak from this because we're at USC. Like, it just feels like a lot of people are like, wow, we have a QB1. Like, we have a guy who's legit. And it's felt like that with both Moss. Obviously, it felt that with Caleb, but it's felt that way with Moss and MAIAVA. Do you sort of see that, like, being an equal thing from this year to last year with Moss? I know, like, Moss had showed the hype in that Holiday Bowl, but MAIAVA is just so much more athletically gifted. I think it's apples to oranges to me.
Yeah, I'd probably say the hype is definitely, I'd definitely say the hype is more warranted. When we've spent this entire episode hyping up JAYDEN MAIAVA, I think it's definitely more warranted than Miller Moss. Everyone knew he was QB1 last year. I think it was just more because people knew him more around campus than anything. It was he knew more regular people. I mean, we have friends who were friends with him. I think MAIAVA, people think of his QB1 as football, not because of his story. I also would argue there's less questioning of Jayden MAIAVA as QB1 than there was Miller Moss. Because, I mean, both of us came out of the spring game. We were watching that game. We were at the press conference afterward. We both were thinking Jayden MAIAVA looks really good. And obviously, yeah, exactly. And we're kind of questioning, is Miller Moss really the guy when you have a guy like MAIAVA? Like, how long can you keep this guy on the bench? But, of course, we didn't have a spring game this year, so it's harder to question, if Longstreet could do anything. I just think there's less questioning of the talent behind MAIAVA. I'll say that.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing that I took away from it, and I'm sure you'll agree, is last year Lincoln Riley was raving a lot about Miller Moss. And like you can say all you want about like the spring game, or not the spring game, the Holiday Bowl, or the hype around Miller just like in that game heading into the offseason. But there was like not a single soul on earth that could find any evidence of Miller Moss being more skilled than MAIAVA. Like it wasn't like Miller Moss is better than MAIAVA. It was more like Miller's the guy. Miller's the guy right now.
Yeah.
And it just felt kind of like weird, right? Like we knew MAIAVA had the strong arm. We knew he could run. Miller has a decently strong arm, but couldn't run. Like there was no like, I just felt like there was no really justification about why Miller started.
No, the justification was he did this in the Holiday Bowl. He has a fantastic story. And that's not discrediting it. I think he's a good quarterback. I just think when you compare him to a guy like MAIAVA, someone who still has more collegiate starts than Miller Moss, I just think that there's more to I don't know. Maybe this is saying ridiculous. I just think that there is so much more he can do.
Yeah. And I want to just go to this real quick. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think like Caleb was in a tough position, just with the way the team was. Do you have any thoughts on this, Terrence?
Let me read it. Sorry. Yeah, no, he 100% doesn't have to. Like, he 100%. Caleb, I agree with that. Caleb had to be the hero all the time. MAIAVA does not have to. This is a better O-line. This is a better wide receiver core in totality, I would say. I think it's a better running back room, better tight ends. I mean, just going to this right here. We're not saying that Lane are serviceable. We have extensively talked about how talented we think they are. I think that this is a better offense where MAIAVA doesn't have to do too much. I think the only question around MAIAVA is, will he do too much? Because that has been a problem of him trying to do too much.
I think maybe the confusion on this comment, we were talking about Taj Washington and Brendan Rice and not Lane and Lemon. I wholeheartedly agree. I think Lane and Lemon are, again, they're guys who are going to be thriving on Sundays, not just playing on Sundays.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about last week. We saw mocks with Jacoby Lane as high as 12 to the Cowboys, and both agree. He just has to be a little more consistent. That's all.
Yeah, and I think to our point around the receivers, I mean, there are quarterbacks that will be as good as the team around them and as good as their wide receiver one, if we're being honest. Miller Moss is that type of quarterback. I'm just going to be honest. To his credit, he was really only as good as Jacoby Lane making an incredible touchdown grab, or Mekhi Lemon coming out of nowhere and making a catch and running yak yards, 40 yak yards or whatever. Like there was no circumstance where if those were, even at the Michigan game, like one of Miller Moss's better performances, he did not show me anything in that game that like, you know what, I can go and win that football game. I can go and make the play. It was a lot of just the receivers putting in the work, like Jay Fair getting wide open for a touchdown, Jacoby Lane, creating an awesome, bit of space to go up and grab a touchdown. Goes on, right? And then you can talk about the running back rooms as well, but we know USC didn't depend on them the way they maybe wanted or maybe should have in retrospect. So yeah, I think the point we're trying to make is MAIAVA is not a guy who is as good as his receivers. He's much more than that. He transcends the talent of his receivers. I think that, you never want to, hope for any injuries or anything, but, looking at the depth.
Where is this going?
Well, I'm just saying, like, never want to like jinx it is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Like in the receiver room, like you're never really going to have wounds throughout the year. no matter what happens with USC's receiving room, I think MAIAVA could transcend that. I'm just saying, like, if you lose some depth, I mean, again, part of your depth this year is freshmen in Corey Sims and Xavier Jordan. You have Strawn, you have Zacharias Williams, but the depth is not necessarily a plenty from a veteran standpoint. I'm saying if a guy like Strawn goes down, or if a guy like Lemon is out for a couple weeks, because we saw him get hurt last year, I think having a guy like MAIAVA who's just versatile is going to help. That's what I mean by that.
Yeah. Okay. No, I understand.
Yeah. Well, kind of wrapping up a little bit here. If anyone has any additional points or questions, make sure to drop those right now if you can. And Terrence, do you have any sort of thoughts you wanted, or questions talking points you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, I think just last thing we'll end with MAIAVA, unless there's questions, of course. Give me ceiling of the stat lines of Jade MAIAVA.
Ceiling of the stat lines. Okay.
Do you get what I mean?
Well, you give yours first.
So I think like ceiling, like, passing yards, I'll say passing yards, rushing yards, it's impossible in college, obviously, for quarterbacks, and like touchdowns. I would say 3,500 passing yards. Maybe I'll just project it actually of what I think you'll get. 3,500 passing yards, 25 touchdowns. Does that sound ridiculous to say?
No. What about rushing?
Rushing touchdowns?
Rushing yards.
Well, that's hard. See, that's hard is the thing with college, because they count sack.
Oh yeah,
sack stuff. So I don't really. It's hard to guess that.
What about net yards? Like just
net yards. Over under 3,700 maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. See. Yeah. No. I mean, I don't know if I guess I'd agree with that. It's just, again, like, I was trying to do some math in my head. It's hard to map it out with the limited sample size.
Yeah, right.
We got a Hassan Longstreet.
Yeah, I can't say I've seen a lot of those around.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, you never.
We'll see in first couple weeks how he is.
I think I'll say this to you people who maybe want Longstreet to play.
People who want Longstreet to play.
If Longstreet plays, it probably means USC is having a bad season. So just gonna be blunt. I mean, again, that's up to Lincoln Riley, but at the end of the day,
unless he truly beats out MAIAVA
in
camp, which I just don't see happening.
I mean, we saw last year, like, Miller Moss get shaken up a little bit. Like, injuries do happen.
Yeah.
Of course, like, it's hard to, especially for a guy like MAIAVA who hasn't started a full season in 2 years, to go out and play a full season. So we'll see if they run a scheme that has Hassan Longstreet come in. But by and large, we're going to be seeing number 14 slinging the balls on Saturdays, and I think it's going to be a really interesting year and a fun year for MAIAVA, because he'll get to play a full year at SoCal and have the chance to kind of showcase maybe the weaker parts of his game and make those stronger in a full season.
Yeah, they couldn't have said it better.
Yeah, well, rounding up here, again, we'll be back and we'll have some more talking points next week. And again, if you guys want to hear our takes on like the wide receiver room, the running backs, and the defense, we have a bunch of previous videos from prior weeks. So make sure to go check those out. But again, make sure to follow us on socials. We have our Twitter handles at the bottom of your screen, as well as the same Instagram names for both. We talk about USC football, every sport, basketball, baseball, across the board, on those social accounts as well. So make sure to like and follow and subscribe if you enjoyed. That'll do it for this one. Appreciate you guys once again, and we'll see you in the next one.
Right on.